Park Plan Commission to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could we get a roll call, please?
Croner,
Here.
Stanton, Curran, Engel, Manning,
Here.
Gatto,
Here.
Gray,
Here.
Augustinian,
Present.
Shaw.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. And do we have any communications from staff this evening? See, we have somebody at the table here? Do we have somebody at the table here?
Oh, well, yeah, I was going to
You're gonna wait
go
till
to the order, but.
All right, well, keep us in suspense all evening. All right. Additional communications, I'll cover these when we get to public hearings. We do have some notice of public hearing here. First item is approval of the minutes of the April 19th, 2018 regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved Commissioner Augustiniak. Second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Manny. Okay, is any corrections or?
Yeah, there's a
edits?
correction that we're taking care of before the meeting on page 413 that we discussed, Paul and I discussed, and Barb has notes on it.
Okay, general
General
topic?
regarding the consensus of the panel regarding the sign ordinance back on the March 15th meeting
Okay,
with the statements made to Ms. McHenry about bringing everything into conformance with the new sign ordinance.
okay. So is that clear for you guys what the correction is? Any other comments or corrections, edits
Do I
for the
need to
minutes?
adjust my motion to minutes as amended?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
Certainly.
Yeah, we'll accept the minutes as amended. I'm recommending a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
as amended. And a second on that?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Gray. Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes of the April 19th, 2018 regular meeting as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Okay. First item on the agenda tonight is a public hearing for the Tesla supercharging station at 7204 West 191st Street. My understanding is that the applicant, petitioner, has requested that we table that item and to a date certain so that they have more time to prepare. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so,
Still need to open it though.
yep, I am just taking a quick look at the notice of public hearing. Make sure we're good here. Okay. So I do see we have proper public notice. So on this, we just need to entertain a motion to open the public hearing, and then we will table it to a date certain.
So
Do I have
moved.
a motion to open a public hearing? Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are in public hearing, and now I will entertain a motion to
May 17th.
table it to date of May 17th.
I make a motion to table said meeting till May 17th.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Manny. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Paul, I assume we'll work that out with the petitioner. Okay. The second item we have this evening is on the agenda as workshop/public hearing. After discussing with Paula, I'm going to assume all the commissioners have read the staff report pretty well. This is site plan approval and special use permit with exceptions for the pause group at 8301 West 191st Street. as it has been noticed as a public hearing as well, so if there are no objections from the rest of the commission, I would like to go ahead and proceed with this as a public hearing. We can go ahead and go straight through it and get that out of the way. Any questions or concerns from the commission? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
I will second
Move
it.
Commissioner Croner, second Commissioner Augustiniak. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, public hearing is now open. Do we have the petitioner here? Pause. Or do you wish to speak on this here?
We do, yes.
Okay, so anybody who wishes to speak, just have you stand up real quick, raise your right hand, and do you swear the testimony you're going to give this evening is the truth?
I do, yes.
Okay, excellent. I apologize. I should have asked if there's any objectors of the public, anyone else who would wish to speak on this.
You don't think you'll say anything? Okay.
Okay, all right. So that's excellent. Thank you. And as I said, I did confirm notice of proper notice public hearing. And so with that, we will proceed with the staff presentation.
Yes, and thank you, Commission and Chairman, for allowing us to move forward with the public hearing. I'm sure the applicant is appreciative. They've been ready, but we had a pretty full agenda and some large issues on the last couple of meetings, so they've been very cooperative in working with us. So as the Chairman mentioned, we got site plan approval, but then we also have a substantial deviation. Why did that? Substantial deviation for the PUD of Brookside Glen. Their purpose this evening, or their desire, is to construct an accessory structure at 8301 191st Street. And with that, there are certain aspects of that structure that don't meet code. As we have all learned, when you're in a PUD, we don't look at it strictly as a variance. We look at it as an exception to code, wherever there's a deviation from the code. The fact that we're adding another structure puts it into a substantial category, and so that's why we're doing a public hearing process. I am sure everyone is probably familiar, and maybe even some of you have adopted pets from the facility out on 191st Street. They are a no-kill shelter, and actually I'm told that there are many animals that live out their life on the facility. They survive by volunteers and donations. They've existed for over 25 years, serving Tinley Park in the region. And the facility that exists there now is a 6,500 square foot facility. And what has become an increasing problem is storage. They are maxed out. You might recall, I think some of you were on the commission back in 2016, I believe it was, when they actually came forward asking to be released from a covenant that restricted them from selling their property. So they've actively, and they continue to actively seek a new facility, but in the time being, they're trying to do what they can to take care of the storage facility. The property is part of the Brookside Glen PUD, and when it was originally platted, this parcel was kind of, just a leftover parcel, quite honestly. It's on the other side of the ComEd lines, completely encumbered with floodplain, not a particularly useful piece of property. I don't know why this is going out. I guess it doesn't matter if they can see it. So the developer donated it to the village and donated it for a fire station. Fire department said this really isn't going to serve our needs, and so they built where they built over in the east, and so the village was left with this parcel. Then we sold it to Paws for $1, and that was history. So they've flourished at that location, actually to the point of having so many significant adoptions that they've run out of room. Well, with the storage problem, I actually heard this from the executive director. Nolan Rahm came in. I don't know if he flew in with a cape or whatever, but he came in, and you'll meet him this evening, came in to save the day. As I hear stories all the time about Eagle Scouts, they're pretty spectacular young men, and Nolan is no exception. So he was a volunteer there already, and he heard and he not only heard, but he saw the problem with storage, And he approached the director and said, I'd like to do something to help you out. That's all it took. He took it from there, got the donations, the largest donation here being the garage from Danley Garages, and they're represented this evening. Ozinga is providing the concrete. He's gotten, I don't want to steal his thunder in terms of the number of donations that he's been able to acquire, so quite impressive young man. So the plats, and you can kind of even see by the topo, the floodplain running pretty close to the back end of that building. So their options of even locating this accessory structure is pretty limited. The turquoise area represents the new structure. The orangey color is what is there now. They meet, we worked with them on the site plan because there's certain separations, like the 10-foot separation is required for accessory structures. 26 feet is his west side yard property setback, and he's 83.5 feet from his north property line. Just for educational purposes, because you often hear us talk about front yards, if you look through our ordinance, accessory structures are not allowed in the front yard. But by our definitions, we have a whole table that talk about encroachments and allowable encroachments. Our table is very specific about saying you cannot encroach in a required yard. And I'm only telling you this because this is going to come up over and over, and just trying to help everyone understand. When you think about front yard, it's not just everything in front of the building, which would be kind of common sense, and that would cause you to say, well, this isn't required. The required front yard is that space from the front lot line to the front setback line, and I believe in R5 it's just 25 feet. So they're well beyond that, and that's why I'm not looking at that as an exception as well. So the acreage is only 2.71 acres, but as I mentioned, it's significantly encumbered by floodplain. They got 25 parking spaces out there. That is heavily used because they have a lot of volunteers. So as part of the site plan review, we look at landscaping. Again, this was another donation, but their requirement by code is just a foundation plantings. They actually had provided an earlier plan. This is much, much better than the earlier plan. And for those of you that are interested in this sort of thing, some perennials in there, some evergreens in there, and then you're probably all familiar with burning bushes that give you some fall color. So that's been a nice plan that's provided. And there is some existing landscaping out there already on the west side. I mean, really, that property, you're not going to see much from the west. You're into the undeveloped area. You're not going to see much from the east because that's the ComEd. You're not going to see much from the south because that's all floodplain area. So they're kind of somewhat screened already. Could you just play around with the connections, because that's going in and out here. It's probably driving everybody crazy. So in terms of architecture, the property out there now has these transom windows that run across the front of the facade. So Danley was nice enough to include that kind of architectural element in the garage. Otherwise, it's garages are usually fairly prototypical. They also actually modified the roof line to match the roof line that's out there. As part of the accessory structure requirements, we do require every structure to be entirely masonry. They had never planned to do any masonry on this. Staff worked with them to see if they couldn't replicate the look of the building, so it's fully masonry on the front of the building, as you see there. And then something that just came this evening, and I appreciate your cooperation on this, and I believe it's in front of you. I asked that at least they would have a return of a knee wall on the east and the west sides. You're probably never going to see the west side, quite honestly. And the east side you will see as you're entering the building. Probably not going to see much of it from the right-of-way. And so the colors and all that will match, not blend, will be what you see out there now. The roof color will also be what you see there now. So those are the concerns that I had when we were talking about the site plan, and those they have addressed all the issues, all the open items I had at that time. Regarding zoning, it's an R5, it's low density single family. Obviously it's not residential. That was all negotiated as part of the original PUD. It's in the Brookside Glen PUD, as I mentioned. They have Mokina to the west and to the north. And to the south is Brookside Glen, and it's R5 PUD. To the east is our recently approved residential multifamily development. As part of the exceptions, as the exceptions that are required as part of the deviations from code, our accessory structures are limited to 720 square feet. They're asking for 864 square foot facility, so that's 144 deviation. So that's the exception, they're asking for that. Also, we recently went over this with Southwest Christian School Garage, where they wanted to have it serviced by utilities. In this case, right now, what I'm hearing, they only need it serviced by electric, not by water, sewer, or gas. Our code actually only mentions gas, sewer, and water. I'm sure it meant to include all utilities. So I'm just to be safe and prudent, I think it's important that you mention that we understand it's going to be serviced by electric. All of those kind of lines have to be done underground. And the last is the sign. The sign is going to be placed on this accessory structure. They don't have a sign on the main structure. If they were putting it on the main structure, they could have a much larger sign. Because of the linear frontage on the accessory structure, it's somewhat limited. But they're limited to 18 square feet, and they're wanting it to be 24. We require just a complete box around this image. I mean, I'm sure you could cheat it if you wanted to and probably get it down to 18, but I have to go by a complete box around it. It's going to be 4 by 6 feet. We also have a maximum letter height of 36 inches, but this will only be 24 inches. It's going to be a routed out metal sign, correct?
Yes.
That I think Nolan's doing it himself, right?
Yeah, I'm doing it in my high school shop.
All right, I'm stealing your thunder, so I don't want to do that. So that's the logo for PAWS, and it will not be internally lit. It'll be spot lit from the foundation. So the items that I had identified that I'd asked the applicant to address, they've cooperated and met all of them. The materials, the building materials, that was probably one of the biggest concerns. It still doesn't meet totally the code. They aren't doing the south facade. South facade will remain vinyl.
Correct.
And, but the north facade will be completely masonry painted to match, and then the knee walls will come along both the east and west side. And then the 3 exceptions that I mentioned was size, extending utilities to the facility, and then the sign. And those remain the only outstanding items. So you have 3, you have actually just 2 motions that you'd need to consider, the second motion including 3 exceptions. But one would be your site plan approval, which was your approval, and then the second would be a recommendation going to the village board, and that would include the 3 exceptions that we discussed. The standards I've included this time. Usually we wait till, I know it's going to be a public hearing, I took a guess. So the standards are all mentioned in here, and if you want me to go over those later, I can do that for you. And that's all I have, sir.
Okay. So presentation from the petitioner?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Andrew Vandermore, Venamore. I work very closely with Danley's. I'm responsible for all of their permitting processes throughout Chicagoland. And at this point, I think it might be instructive for everybody if I have Nolan come up, give his rendition on everything that he's done to this point. I'll step back in a little later and sort of discuss the nuts and bolts of everything, but I think it's probably apt for him to have a chat with you now.
Hi, I'm Nolan Rahm from Troop 644 in Evergreen Park, Illinois. Just to give you a little bit of background, I've been volunteering at PAWS for about a year now, my sister for about 4 years. And I started to notice there was a problem with storage in our laundry room when there's a sign that says you have to stay below this height because fire code is being broken. And then those signs started appearing more and more around the shelter. And then one day we had a polio case in the stray room, and I was needed in the stray room to help clean dog cages. And I went in there, and there's just stacks of cans of food and bags of food on top of the stray dog cages. So I knew there was something that needed to be done, so I went to Paul, the president, and asked what could I do for my Eagle project since I am a Life Scout. And he said that we could use a new structure to put all of the stuff. So that's what I tried to do. And I have adopted one of my dogs from there, so Paws is very near and dear to my heart. And I'm there every Saturday that I can be. So if you guys have any questions for me, ask. And then even if it's about my uniform, sometimes I get questions about my uniform. Do you have any questions?
Do you want to tell them where you got all your donations from?
I got donations from Danley, Ozinga, Canoe, JT Electrical, the Home Depot in Frankfurt. Thank you.
Your landscaping?
The landscaping, the design came from Fassels & Sons. I'm still working on getting all of the landscaping donated, but Fassel & Sons is also donating some of the landscaping. I have Wolseley Industrial Group. I have the Home Depot in Frankfurt doing all of the drywall. I have Bob's Drywall hanging the drywall. And I have Trello Roofing and Remodeling doing spray foam insulation on the inside of the building. And I think that's all of them.
Great. If we could, as a matter of the public record, get a list of that. It'd be good to have all of those companies included in the public record. That'd be excellent.
I can make a copy of it.
Yeah, I can send
So,
you a copy as well.
We'll get to some of the more fascinating details in a minute, but so you got a lot of the materials donated and some of the design, it sounds like. Who's going to be doing the work?
Danley's is actually doing most of the work, and then Danley's is building the actual structure. Ozinga's doing the concrete, and then I just have smaller suppliers coming in to do, like, one's doing insulation, one's doing drywall, just smaller parts. And then my scout troop will be coming in to paint the interior, as well as move everything into it.
Great.
Who's doing the excavation for you?
I believe Ozinga's doing that as well.
Okay, so pull it out and put it in, okay.
Great.
Nolan, a great initiative. I have a question for you regarding the sign. So you're going to make the sign in your shop?
Yeah, we have a plasma CAD machine, so I'm going in every day after school to work a little bit on it. The plasma cam software has been giving me trouble recently on the computer I've been using, so it's been a little bit difficult, but it is mostly done, and I should be able to have a finished product soon.
Okay, thank you.
Who gave you the checklist of what you needed to do for each step, if you don't mind me asking? Was this all you? I mean, did you say, I need a structure, I need excavation, I need this, I need that?
Yeah, this is all me. I went down step by step what you need to do to build a building, and I've solved every one of the problems so far.
Amazing.
There's a lot of companies that could use a general superintendent like that.
Look into contracting or engineering, for sure, for your
Practical
future.
experience. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. We'll see if there are any questions.
I think they have a little more.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we don't want to cut you short, but we're going to get to the heart of it here now.
Here, hold on, let me ask one question, if I may.
Sure.
So talk to us about your uniform. You brought up your uniform, so
my
we're going to ask
uniform,
about it.
I got this 2 years ago, and this is the Order of the Arrow initiation. So what it is you are elected by the other boys in your troop, and it's who exemplifies the Scout Law and Scout motto. So the Scout Law is: a Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. So if you exemplify all of those traits, then your scouts can vote you in, and then you go, and your ordeal is normally at your scout camp. So mine is Waspy Scout Reservation in the Upper Peninsula, Whitehall, Michigan, if any of you are familiar with that area. And what we did is you go in, it's a traditional Indian ceremony, and then you spend a night under the stars, and then there's 3 challenges that they present you with. The first one is having a day of silent reflection, so you don't talk at all for 24 hours. Your second is Scarce Rations. So normally up at camp, our camp is a 200 square mile place. Our smaller camp, we have one large reservation, and then we just have smaller camps in it. Camp Wolverine, which is where my troop stays, is roughly like 40 miles square. So it's a large area. So you normally need a lot of calories because you burn a lot. Where my troop normally camps is about 1.5 miles from the closest program area. So they cut your rations in half. So that's a challenge you also have to deal with. And then your third is Cheerful Service. So my Cheerful Service was going into the food prep area for all of the camps, and we cleaned out their basement. We re-rolled just over 1,000 tents, just over 2,000 cots, and then we also swept, we mopped in the basement, and then I also did dishes for a while. And
Get used to it.
yeah, and then you also have to sleep outside one night, and the night I slept out, it was raining, and then there was a pack of coyotes that decided they'd come and visit us.
Oh, gosh.
So that was a fun experience. But it was fun. And then this is the Life Scout badge. So it goes tenderfoot, second class, first class, Star, Life, Eagle. So I'm right below Eagle, and I only have one more merit badge I need to complete, and then as soon as I get the project done, I can go for my Eagle Board of Review and then become an Eagle Scout. So I'm really close. And then here is the Purple Panda. It's what you get when you complete all the 3 merit badges, which are Envi-Sci, so Environmental Science, Fish and Wildlife, and Forestry. And I completed all 3 of those up at my Boy Scout camp in 1 week. That was fun. And then the cords are, I work with the Cub Scouts. Not only do we have a Boy Scout troop at our church, we also have a Cub Scout troop. So I'm a den leader, so I go and I just do what the parents normally do. So I led a troop of tigers, so 5 to 7-year-olds. For 5 years I've done that now. And then I have to see if there's anything else important.
How old are you?
I'm 14.
And it's no more the Boy Scouts of America, correct?
Yeah, we changed our names to include girls, so it's now Scouts BSA. So it's still led by Boy Scouts of America, but we changed our official name just to Scouts.
And your dad, is that your dad right there?
Yeah. He's recording it because the last merit badge I have to do is communications merit badge, and you have to give a public presentation. So this counts as my public presentation as well.
Dad, congratulations.
Should be a badge for efficiency.
Very good. I will say, 14, you must be very proud, should be very proud. I'm just going to cite a bit of trivia statistic that I learned myself from former village clerk Pat Ray at a village board meeting, I think a couple years ago, when they were honoring some Eagle Scouts. He happened to mention that the U.S. military's elite military units, special forces, rangers, etc., are disproportionately represented by Eagle Scouts.
I remember
Yeah.
that.
So that
I
was something
remember
that stuck with me. Obviously, it stuck with you as well,
Yeah.
Paula. So
Yeah.
I would say you're probably well on your way there. Something to consider. Definitely prepared.
All right, thank you.
Good
Thank
job.
you.
Thank you.
So as I said, we can move on to some of the more or less interesting parts of this now.
Right. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely.
So, as Nolan's mentioned, Danley's is the general contractor on this project. I work with them. We're here tonight just to present, based on Paula's staff report, the sort of nuts and bolts of the application. Nolan's obviously given you a very good indication of the reasons for the structure. I think that if you read through Paula's report, there are items that were outstanding that we're still working through. We've given Paula answers for the most of them. I think the best thing for me to do right now might be just to deal with those specific open items. I know Paula's run over them, but to hear them from our side, just so that you understand that we are on the same page with staff. We acknowledge their concerns, and I think are virtually there to resolving them. The facade aspect, when Nolan brought this project to Danley's, there was perhaps from Danley's standpoint a misinterpretation of what was going to be necessary as far as the project was concerned as it relates to the exterior finishes. As you can imagine, a masonry structure is a heck of a lot more expensive than just a standard frame structure with siding. That's how we approached it when we initially submitted to Paula a few months ago. That was our assumption. We didn't understand that. So we now appreciate the concerns, obviously, based on not only the ordinance as it reads, but the existing structure that's there now that you probably all know. And we will obviously endeavour to make sure that our proposed building matches that existing facility as closely as possible, which is why on the initial drawing that you had in your staff packet had shown just the north elevation as being a masonry facade with those clerestory or awning windows up on top, obviously to match the existing structure as closely as possible. In working with staff in the last week or so, we do understand the necessity behind having something a little bit more closely mirroring the building that's there at the moment. And Paula has suggested that we run a knee wall down both the west and the east sides, which we are happy to do. Speaking to, on page 4 of your packet, and actually on the document that I handed out, that we brought with us this evening as well, as it relates to the elevations, Paula had a question about why the design of the structure has clipped ends on that gable roof. The building that's there at the moment is somewhat of a mix of a gable and a hip roof. The facade that we are covering up, in fact, is a hip roof on the west, and then it runs across, basically like a gable all the way onto the main roof structure. Our thoughts were by clipping this structure, the gable ends on this structure would more closely mirror what's there. So that's the intent behind the design that you're looking at that we've proposed. The size of the structure, I think, when Nolan approached Stanley's, the idea was to get something that was practically sized to deal with the items that he's just mentioned to you as it relates to the storage of foodstuffs and the other aspects that have become a problem in the facility at the moment. So the size that was brought to us was what we're presenting tonight. I hope the board can see the rationale behind us suggesting something of that size. It is larger than, as Paula noted, what is permitted, but I think it's a pretty key aspect for this structure to be this size in order to help solve some of those interior issues that PAWS is currently facing. Item number 3, the utilities. There was some discussion initially to bring water and sewer into the building. Obviously, we're running electric there. We'd like that to be considered still as an exception to cover the electric if it's not officially stipulated. There is some interest from when I spoke to Bradley this morning. There may be the necessity to have a drain in there. I'm not sure about that just yet, so I would like that exception to be left as part of the discussion, just in case there is a reason to put a drain in there to keep the place clean, to keep the chance of rodents getting in there and established in there. I think the aspect of trying to keep it clean potentially with water might be advantageous to maintain that drain. So if we could keep that exception in there, that would be certainly preferable for us. And then finally, as it relates to the sign, I think without the structure, I was just over there again this afternoon, everybody knows it's the PAWS facility. Having the sign that Nolan has designed here, I think will really give some pizzazz not only to the building, the structure that we're putting there, but will add itself to the entire facility. Ground lit, it won't be backlit. I think that it will really, help to delineate this facility, and it will be certainly front and center as you drive in off 191st Street. So I think if you could consider that as part of your deliberation. The standards for zoning for site plan approval and special use, I think that in my document that I presented to Paula, we've gone through all of those and identified how the project relates to all of those standards. I think, even ignoring the efforts, the amazing efforts that Nolan has gone to this point, I think you'll understand that the facility itself offers a heck of a lot to not only Tinley Park, but all of the surrounding communities as well. And I think this, this structure, as it helps the facility offer those same services, continue to offer them, probably improve upon the services that it offers, I think is certainly a very good use of the special use permit process. I'm happy to answer any questions if the board or staff have them at this point.
Can we start that on this end, Commissioner Augustiniak? Thank you for your presentation.
Yes.
My pleasure.
Yeah, again, thank you for the presentation. I don't have specific questions, it's just, I'm happy to see, you know, there was a phrase that was used several years ago called it takes a village, and this proves that adequately. It's one person, that's not just one person, it takes everybody. Looks like a lot of companies pitched in. It did take one individual to man up
Bring it together.
and bring it together. And I think that it's a wonderful story to tell.
Yeah, agreed.
For people to know. I don't have issues with a lot of the variations you're asking for, because the location of this, there'd be no adverse effect based on what I can surmise from here to any residential communities. Even other businesses necessarily wouldn't, because you have the utility easements, and there's enough distance between their lot line, if I'm reading this right, and the businesses in Mokina just to the west. So there shouldn't be any adverse effect. It shouldn't affect anybody's property values. It shouldn't affect any of that. At least that's what I'm seeing, and I'm appreciative of that. But I don't have any other specific questions as regards to the variance.
Can I just ask a question in Downey's Garage?
Sure.
As a corporation, obviously this is a major undertaking from you, which we truly appreciate. How did you get involved in this, or why did you get involved in this? Absolutely. Please.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Dan Hamburg. I'm the business manager for Danley's. I had the pleasure of receiving actually an email and a call when this whole thing started. Our owner, Doug Cook, brought it to my attention, said, Dan, maybe this is something we should consider. Let's have a phone interview. So we had a phone interview. That was back in October. We met with Nolan and his dad over Christmas break. We met with Paul at the site, and it was as captivating as it's been tonight. It's been since the first call. It really has been. And so we get a lot from the communities that we operate in and we gain business from, and this is just one really good reason, a good way to give it back.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Excellent.
And I'll just add to that about, well done on the corporate social responsibility and taking care of the stakeholders, the people in the community. So 100% agree with what Commissioner Croner said. In addition, I do have some questions regarding some of the information I see from the packet.
Sure.
Now, my understanding is the floodplain is to the east and to the south, but the site itself is outside the floodplain.
The construction area is outside of the
Okay,
floodplain.
I just want to be clear on that. The second thing was with those new plans, I saw the knee wall for the east and west side. They were showing a 3 feet height. On the motion in the packet, it's saying 4 foot high. I'm just asking, it doesn't matter, right?
To me, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
I was, I didn't really transmit that to me. I'm used to a 4-foot knee wall.
That's
so-
fine. A lot of those questions, Commissioner Gray,
Yeah.
we essentially, again, I'm here to make sure that everybody understands we're on the same page with staff. If there are discrepancies like that, and even as it relates to the specific materials, I know we were supposed to present a material board here as part of this process. Again, the masonry aspect of it that we've missed this whole time, that only just came up, so we've not been able to do that. What we've agreed to do with staff is that they will sort of be the gatekeeper as it relates to the 4 foot high, the finish of the masonry. We're going to match the color of the existing asphalt shingle that's out there now. It's a green color. The siding will be in that same family of colors as the building is at the moment. So we will present the material aspect of it, and as far as the height is concerned as well, to staff specifically for their approval. So,
This is to scale. I'm comfortable with the proportions that I see here.
okay.
any
Yeah, I think
reinforced. I'm fine with it.
I'm okay with it too. I just wasn't sure if there was some code that had to be for. And
No.
and additionally, originally you were just asking for a 10-foot run on the west
Correct.
side, but it looks much, much better with the
If
full
that
run.
was something, staff was being, when we sort of explained our position on the masonry piece, staff was endeavoring to cut us some slack.
Yeah.
But I think everybody agrees, and we did too, that that wouldn't terribly make a lot of sense aesthetically, even though it's on the west elevation where, again, there's not going to be a lot of site visibility there. It just doesn't really make sense.
I appreciate what they did. So really, between the two things,
We're probably about
they've
the
been
same.
generous and.
Yeah, it seems like there's a very good rapport in terms of back and forth and adjusting to community needs. I have one last question, and that is actually on the floor plan itself.
Yes.
That you just handed out. Now, you guys have like the thickened edge slab for the floor slab, and I see it only goes down 1 foot. Now, my consideration is just for frost. Typically, even in garages, we'll have a minimum 3.5 feet. I'm just bringing this up for consideration for longevity of the structure.
So, we haven't gone through a building code review yet.
Sure.
That will come up at that point. To be truthful, to be informational, let me rephrase that. Most garages, and depending on which code a particular municipality operates under, whether it's international code or local code,
Right.
the vast majority of garages that Danley's builds are involved with are on floating slabs. Now that depth below grade can adjust. Maybe it goes down to 20 inches. There are a few communities here and there, depending on the size of a structure, that will require a frost-protected foundation. But the vast majority of them for a standard garage, and this, as you can see, will not even have vehicular access and have the weight of 1, 2, or 3 vehicles in it to have sort of that dramatic of an impact of weight on the slab. So the vast majority, like I said, of garages are in fact floating slabs. We're going to deal with that.
The slab itself, I don't have an issue with. It's just the edges of it. Typically, I'm an engineer, a professional engineer. You will go 3.5 feet down. The reason being is you are near a floodplain where you're going to have more water. Water will expand 9% of its volume when it freezes. So you will have heave, which with a rigid concrete slab can cause issues. I see you got steel rebar in there. That looks. Actually, you got welded wire fabric. But either way, that's good protection. I'm just saying, as a consideration for longevity, you wouldn't want to have this nicely donated building that, experiences some cracking due to frost.
Right, and that is certainly, and we appreciate that. That will become part of the plan review that hasn't yet
Right,
occurred.
I understand. Not a problem. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Down this end, Commissioner Manning?
No, Commissioner Gray picked up one of my comments.
No, I'm good.
Okay, great. A couple of questions here. You actually addressed one of them about utilities. I noticed the motion, we're only looking at electrical in here, but the motion, proposed motion calls for all utilities.
And I would prefer to maintain it as that at this point. I just don't want to get hemmed in just based on some conversations I've had in the last couple of days. I'd rather not get hemmed in if, in fact, a drain or something of that nature is necessary just for the overall cleanliness of the structure.
And the nature of what you're working with, that seems reasonable. I just, I would assume that by posing the motion the way we have, it's going to cover.
It doesn't have to be specific.
Right, it's going to cover whether it's just simply storm or sanitary or what have you. And so I think, for my part, I think that's the way to go also, so that you wouldn't have to come back.
Correct.
If you decided to do something
Right.
of that nature. So parking, I noticed that there's, I didn't count the spaces, plenty of parking. It's not, I don't believe it's addressed in the staff report. Just on the face of it, it doesn't appear to be a concern at all. But I do know that it appears as though you're going to lose the accessible parking space up front. Is it going to be relocated?
So the way that parking lot lays out and the location of the building, north wall of the structure, I won't call it a garage, north wall of the structure is going to encroach somewhere between 7 and 8 feet into that accessible parking space, and there's another parking space directly beside it, actually. There appears to be enough aisleway width between the current backside of that handicap space and the adjacent space, all the way back to the parking on the north side of the lot, where we can probably slide that back. That's what we have to figure out yet.
So it might have to be restriped, not
correct.
necessarily relocated.
Correct.
Okay. I kind of
We
thought
still
that
have to
would-
figure that out yet. The perimeter landscaping has to kick in there as well, obviously. So that's something that we're still juggling with a little bit. The goals most certainly is not to eliminate parking spaces here.
In any event, I would assume that during department staff review, it's going to be covered. As I said, it looks like there's plenty of options there.
Correct.
So this is just a question about, this is being developed as an accessory structure, and therefore, and there's a lot of exceptions here. If this were built as an addition, this is really a question for staff. If this were built as an addition, just for my own information, would they need these exceptions? It would just go through the permitting process?
But the cost and
Right,
the
so tying it in.
considerations are greater.
They'd need a footing.
Yeah, we discussed that in the
a
beginning.
foundation. Okay.
Yeah, that's a full form foundation at that point, which when this, as you can understand, how this whole thing is getting put together, it's a
It
pretty
also would have
dramatic
pushed
change.
in a lot of code requirements on the existing facility that would have been cost prohibitive.
That was my assumption. I just wanted to make sure that that was correct. Okay, so the only other item is, this is a zoning point. It's R5, and given that they've been released from that restriction on resale that we talked about earlier, and these deviations, exceptions would, the special use would go with the owner, right? So I'm looking at, for future use, if they were to sell it, what potential anticipated uses or allowed uses would there be in the future?
Yeah, they'd pretty much have to come in, and anything would be a substantial deviation at that respect as well. Could go residential. It's really hard to say.
I mean, it's zoned residential. In theory, somebody could come and turn it into a house, right?
Right, they could.
Okay, all right. I'm just looking at, if I understand correctly, nothing we do here really, because it all goes with the owner.
Right.
Anyone who, a future owner is going to have to come back and
We thought about
figure
that.
it
I
out.
just, you just never want to limit or cause harm down the road, but I couldn't think of anything that would be a problem.
And plus, given the unique nature of the parcel itself, as well as the location, I think that's a
Correct.
real consideration. Okay, so that's about all I had there. Any final comments from any of you folks there, and the petitioner? Any?
You have three sets of standards. Two sets of standards is all. But, they're here. I don't really want to read through them all, but the
No.
standards are.
We'll go through the standards there. I just want, before we move on to that part, I just wanted to see if, based on the discussion, there anything else you wanted to add to it.
Not at all. Thank you for your
Okay.
consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so it sounds like, commissioners, there were no more questions for either the petitioner or for staff. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, at this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any comments from the public before we close public hearing? Okay, none? Okay. Can we entertain a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Move Commissioner
Second.
Augustiniak, second Commissioner Croner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now, we can run through the standards.
Well, I'll just summarize, since they are in the report, and you've also been given the findings by the applicant. But from
Yep.
a site plan perspective, You look at the permitted uses in the district, it was approved as part of the PUD, and you just want to make sure that there's safe ingress and egress. Since it's an accessory structure, all the existing uses are remaining intact. Those have been functioning satisfactorily, so we're not contributing to any other issue. The outdoor trash area is enclosed per code, and they're not changing that or moving that, so that pretty much meets code, and they did provide the landscape plan. With respect to the special use, those are a little bit broader in terms of the standards you want to meet. You're obviously going to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the community. This is an accessory structure to the main existing structure, so obviously we're not changing the dominant principal use of the property. They are addressing landscaping, they are addressing the architecture of the existing structure. They're maintaining the access as it is now. Regarding any exceptions, we've already gone through the exceptions. I don't think they're overly significant. I think they've given a rationale on the building materials, and they've done their best to match the existing building materials. In terms of contributing to the economic development of the community as a whole, it's a not-for-profit, obviously, but we certainly see the ripple effect of their good works throughout the community, and certainly of Nolan. That's all I have.
Okay. So, given the run through the standards there and the petitioner's petition, any commissioners have any questions on those? Anything to add? No.
I apologize, I did not, for some reason. Brain mints, I usually put the motion on the PowerPoint.
we've got it
I
here. No
apologize,
problem.
but you have them on here.
Okay. So if there are no further questions or comments at this point, I would entertain a motion on this matter.
I'd like to make a motion to grant the petitioner, Andrew Venamore, on behalf of People's Animal Welfare Society of Tinley Park, PAWS, site plan approval in accordance with the plan submitted and listed herein with the following conditions. A masonry knee wall of at least 3 feet in height be constructed on the east facade, and a masonry knee wall of at least 3 feet in height be constructed on the west facade. And then I'd like to make a motion number 2.
Well, first motion.
Vote on
Okay.
that one.
So do
Second.
I have a second on that motion? Any comments or discussion on that? Okay. Can we get a roll call, please?
Croner,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Gatto,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Augustinian,
Aye.
Shaw.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Next motion, please.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the village board the granting of special use permit for a substantial deviation to the Brookside Glen planned unit development to allow for the construction of an 864 square foot accessory structure at 8301 191st Street, consistent with the list of submitted plans as attached herein, and adopt findings of fact submitted by the applicant and findings of fact proposed by village staff as may be amended by the Plan Commission at this meeting with the following exceptions. Number 1, a 144 square foot exception from section 3.1.2.b, accessory structures and uses, of the zoning ordinance, which limits the maximum floor area of an accessory structure to 720 square feet. Number 2, an exception from section 3.1.2.g, accessory structures and uses, of the zoning ordinance, which prohibits accessory structures to be serviced by water, sanitary, sewer, or natural gas in the front yard within the R5 low-density residential zoning district. And 3, a 6 square foot exception to section 9.e, additional standards for permanent sign in residential zoning districts, where the maximum wall sign for the accessory structure is 18 square feet.
Second.
There's a last
That last paragraph is part
This,
of the motion.
the special use and exceptions will allow the petitioner to construct an accessory structure adjacent to the existing pause building for purposes of a 864 square feet storage building serviced with water, electric, and natural gas. It will also allow the petitioner to erect a wall sign measuring 24 square feet in the area.
Okay, move Commissioner Gray, second.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Manning. Roll call vote, please.
Augustiniak,
Aye.
Gray,
Yes.
Gatto,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Croner,
Yes.
Shaw.
Yes. Okay, that motion carries as well. And do we have an approximate timetable on this going before the village board?
Yes, we have it on the May 15th Village Board
May 15th village board meeting.
meeting.
All right, thank you very much. Really enjoyed the presentation and great work for the community.
Yes, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. One last thing for
Thank you.
pause. Don't you have a plant sale this weekend?
Yeah, Saturday and Sunday,
From what time to what time?
10 to 3, I believe.
10 to 3.
10 to
Great
3
plants,
this
guys.
Saturday.
Great
plant sale
deals.
at Pause.
Proceeds go to the animals.
Yeah, here's my email
Thank you.
address. Would you send me
Great.
those?
Thanks again for your time.
Down here.
What's that?
Glad we got it done.
Good point.
Clean copy if you want.
Thank you for your generosity.
report. Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, moving on to item number 3 this evening is a workshop for Verizon Wireless, 8201 West 163rd Street, site plan approval and special use permit with variations. And this is strictly a workshop, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, so move right forward.
I tried to get Kimberly to come back from Mexico to handle this. I'm very disappointed that there's a new employee that she said no. All right, so if I goof up on this, this isn't my project. We have a workshop this evening for installation for a personal wireless tower within a ComEd easement. It's not necessarily erection of a whole monopole because it's actually going inside and being held up by the structure of the pylon. But the variations that are before you is a 61-foot variation since the height limitation is 100 feet. And a variation in terms of the enclosure because our ordinance requires a masonry facade for the shelter. So let's kind of go through the issues here. Some of you know where this might be located. Probably go by this every day and just notice the high tension wires, obviously. But it's south of 167th. And the red dashed line, there's a bike trail that runs through there. So it's nice that there's a multi-use of the ComEd line. The picture on the left, actually there used to be a shelter there. There used to be an antenna there. But they took that down. I think it was erected in 2012. I think you weren't involved. So in our 2012 Google Earth, Kimberly was able to get this shot. So I honestly don't know when it was taken down, but it's gone. It's gone now. Similar to the tower to the north of 167, you know, the one, this is on the south, that's on the left-hand side, the one on the north. It has a shelter there now, screened by vegetation, and you can see the tower running up right through the middle of the pole. So that's what it's gonna look like in real life. The rings there to show you the one that they're gonna be building is on the south side of 163rd, and there on the north side is the one that I just showed you the picture of on the right side here. So the first open item, and we have spoken with the applicant, and they're in process of getting it. I don't think they have it for today, but we always have the RF studies that you can kind of see where the holes are. So one of our requirements is to make sure that this is the only place that this could be. Our hierarchy, remember, I think, Ken, you were on the commission, and when we changed the code in terms of where the hierarchy is. We first like to see them on village-owned property. And then after that, attached to an existing structure, which we're looking at here. So it's pretty high on the hierarchy list. Second would be, well, that we need a special use as part of the requirements. Then third is the height variation. As you can see, ComEd requires a certain separation between the end of their lines and this, so that is why they're asking for the 156 height, and then add another 5 feet for the lightning rod. So the overall variation is for 61 feet. We did ask them to provide a landscape plan, and I did get one today. And so I'll show you pictures of that when we get into the site plan review. Like I said, I just received it this afternoon, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And the other variation is our code. You know, pretty much now, almost all of these are looking for just steel platforms, and they put their equipment on it, and they have a roof. Where in the past, like we had one on 67th Court, they were all in shelters, solid shelters, and in our code we required those to be masonry structures. It's a little redundant because we also required it to be enclosed with a fence, so you actually don't even really see the enclosure. You usually see the top end of the roof. And then we also asked for landscaping, which eventually grows beyond the 6-foot fence anyway. So the site plan, this was the site plan that was in your packet, but this gives you a little closer view. So they did provide the landscaping that we required. These are arborvitaes. You know, these are not my favorite plant, but it certainly provides evergreen year-round screening. It's a quick-growing shrub that has a fairly distinct form. It's a columnar tree, and it grows fast, so I think it'll serve the purpose of providing some softening of the fence area that's there. We also asked them from the bike trail that runs north-south in the ComEd, they were proposing a gravel drive to get to here. I wanted to see that asphalt, so they are providing that, and they are paving that. One of the things that Public Works had asked for was a gate between the trail and the asphalt path. I'm not, you know, that's the Public Works comment. I really didn't necessarily see the utility in that you could put a gate there. If someone wants to go over there, they're just going to ride around the gate. I mean, I couldn't really quite understand, unless we were going to require them to fence completely the perimeter from the point of intersection with the running trail or bike trail. So they're going to have all the security they need with the 6-foot fence and the gate. So that's something I certainly would like the Commission's opinion. It's something Public Works had suggested, but I was concerned about what the utility of that might be. This is the elevation of the gate and the security locks that they have. This actually shows you how this platform works, and I'll let the applicant get into the engineering and details of that, but it's basically their equipment, and then they have a roof canopy to that, and it sits on the platform. I also had requested that the surface, or that the ground improvement totally within the enclosure be all paved, just for maintenance purposes rather than stone, and they have agreed to do that. It'll be an asphalt pad. So the outstanding or open items related to the site plan that Kimberly had in the report included the access drive being asphalt, so they did comply. An additional gate, I recommend you discuss that. The landscape plan, they have complied. Photographs of existing shelters, I'm not sure if you're bringing something with you on that. I think what Kimberly wanted to do there was to get an idea of what these actually look like in the real world. We do have about elevation drawings, so I suspect that was what she was wanting to do on that. And then the outstanding Public Works and engineering items, there were some of those, but those all get handled at the building permit, so you don't really need to make that a condition of your approval. But if there's anything that is not on the plans by the time we go to public hearing, we'll put that in your recommended motions as far as a condition. So, thing keeps going on. So that's pretty much all I have. The outstanding items, I think, have pretty much been addressed. I think the gate is something that needs to be considered. We all know what the 2 variations are. If you're comfortable with the height, and if you're comfortable with the fact that it's not a full masonry enclosure, and those are the two variations that they're seeking.
So before we, thank you, Paul. Before we move on to any questions from the commission, I just want to clarify a point. You started off with the open item that they haven't provided evidence that there's not a suitable location.
Right, that is another, I'm sorry, I forgot that one. They
Yeah.
do need to provide that yet, and he knows that, and he's waiting on his engineer to provide
Okay,
that.
so as we move forward here, that's kind of a base question. So all of this is predicated on assuming that evidence is provided, right? Because
That's our first one.
if we can't get past that point, then this is a moot point here. But we'll proceed forward so that we keep it moving on that assumption.
Okay.
All right. So Commissioner Manny, any questions?
Just one question, if you could explain again, Paula. Why isn't the enclosure being out of masonry? The enclosure. You're saying that it's going to be fenced and not per code masonry.
Not a masonry
Right.
Shelter inside. That's, I'll leave him to explain that. That's not the standard that they're doing, I guess, in the industry anymore. It isn't visible from the outside because the wood fence would screen that.
Okay, so you're saying that it's not an industry standard, but it's a code requirement?
So not cut you off there, but now that I'm thinking of it, perhaps we could have the petitioner come up and, to the extent there's anything you want to add, potentially that might answer some questions before we have them.
Sure.
And then, he can address your question there. So good evening.
Good evening. My name is Brian Donnelly. I'm with Insight Inc. I'm here representing Verizon Wireless. Proposal before you today, as Paula has very well explained, is for a new telecommunications facility with a 161-foot riser pole is what we call this, which is within the framework of an existing Commonwealth Edison high transmission tower. This riser pole does use the Commonwealth Edison transmission power for structural support, which is just something that is worth. No, it's not a self-supporting structure. We feel like we're co-locating on an existing structure in this instance. I have provided a full set of proposed construction drawings to the planning and building departments for review. We are aware of a few outstanding items, as Paula has stated, and we are working with the planning department to resolve those items. Part of the delay is this is the first time that one of these installations has been required to go through this process within the village of Tinley Park. This is actually the fourth such installation that's happened on the same Commonwealth Edison property, on the same set of Commonwealth Edison transmission lines. So we were well into the process when we were asked to comply with the special use application within Tinley Park. So again, I had to ask for our Verizon engineering department to provide with the propagation maps that Paul is referring to, and it just takes some time to get that stuff together. We fully intend on having those in time for the public hearing. As Paula stated, the items that we were able to address quickly, we have done, and we've tried to get them the drawings as quickly as possible once we get it through the Verizon engineering department, Verizon construction department, things like that. In regards to your question about the specific equipment, when telecommunications facilities in the infancy of this technology, they did build large, they look like sheds almost, and put all of their equipment inside those sheds. They were oftentimes temperature controlled, and the equipment was bigger, right? As technology improves, things get smaller, faster, more efficient. My firm works with 3 different wireless carriers. All of them are kind of switching to this smaller platform design. It allows for more flexibility of equipment in the future. Takes up less space. They're now able to use this equipment in smaller spaces, whereas they used to have to find larger lease areas to find the ground equipment. As such, the shelters big sheds with brick masonry that they just really aren't manufactured anymore. In fact, there's a lot of tower companies that have a hard time getting rid of the old ones as telecommunications companies start to abandon sites. This site in particular, to that effect, had this exact installation installed at this exact location. This exact Commonwealth Edison Tower was in fact a U.S. Cellular site from, I think it was 2003 to 2015. In 2015, U.S. Cellular decommissioned the site and worked with Commonwealth Edison to remove all of the equipment, including the shelter and the access road and the landscaping, as well as the riser pole that goes up in the middle of the Commonwealth Edison transmission tower. I prepared at the public hearing to give some more details on Verizon Wireless's specific needs as it relates to this site and why they need it, and some of the other information. But tonight, I'm here as just part of the workshop to answer any questions or comments that you may have.
So Brian, the former pole that was there, that was, my understanding, was 100-foot high within that same power. Is that's what's written on the?
No, it was 161 foot.
So it was the exact same height?
Exact same height. Commonwealth Edison does not allow any wireless
Below it,
carriers
yeah.
below the
That
very
didn't make
top of
sense,
their
okay.
tower. So
Yeah.
all of them have to be a minimum of 6 foot above the existing Commonwealth Tower height. Many of them in the area are identical to this.
Okay, so fair enough. That was my one question. I thought I said it was 100, but so it is an exact mirror of what was there before.
I believe it's an exact mirror of the one that's to the north, and I believe it's the exact mirror of one that I think has been decommissioned to the south on the same property. I believe that, I'm not that familiar. There used to be one just north of 167th, I believe,
It's right off
which has been
167th.
decommissioned as well.
Is the one to the north that
That's
is
the
in the
one she
report,
showed, yeah.
is that also a Verizon tower?
No,
Okay, but same height?
same height.
Is that Orland Park or is that Tinley Park?
I believe it's Tinley Park, but I didn't really get into that one. That wasn't part of mine.
So picking up again over on this side, Commissioner Manny, you had the one question about the shelter. Did you have any other questions?
No, just one clarification,
Okay.
Tinley Park code, we require masonry
So our code
enclosure.
currently requires it, and that's what the variation is for. Commissioner Gatto?
No questions.
Commissioner Gray, I think that was your question?
Yeah, Brian answered my
Commissioner
question.
Cronin?
Absolutely.
One comment, one question. The last, I believe, 3 towers that we've reviewed, we've required the company to put PVC fencing around. I notice you've got wood, some are cyclone. I believe it's the last three that we've done PVC. And from my standpoint, I would stick with that, that it would be a requirement to get my vote. It'd have to be PVC fencing of staff's choice. I also am in agreement with Paula about the arborvitaes, guys. Can we put spruce trees or some sort of regular evergreens rather than the arborvitaes? Arborvitaes end up dying at some point, and yeah, not at all. The
We could put
evergreens.
some other proposals. They look like Cousin It to me on that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in agreement. I'm aligning with you on that too.
I believe we're going to be subject to whatever it is this board tells us to do. So if you don't approve it with arborvitaes, then you don't approve it with
The thing that's kind
arborvitaes.
of funny, they're not screening anything. I mean, we got to
Right.
plan it. So I'm even kind of averse to a, straight line around there. If we could just kind of soften it, even if it was a couple evergreens, deciduous, I imagine ComEd is very sensitive about any kind of
Yeah,
vegetation. So, we could work with them. He'll probably have to run it by ComEd.
Mhm. The other thing is that I think arborvitaes, their growth pattern, their growth rate is a little bit different than, I'm not an arborist or anything like that, but
Here's
obviously
what
they
they're
can't get to a
probably
certain
gonna say.
height.
Peter, I agree with you totally. The root structure from arborvitae, it's still a shrub, whereas pine spruces are actually trees.
Right,
And
right.
they will, to remove them would probably be much more cost prohibitive down the road.
I'll leave that up to, myself, I leave it up to you guys. I just wanted to echo your
No, you're
thoughts there.
speaking to the choir. I feel the same way about the fence that you do.
Yeah, so
And then the only, if I may, the only other thing is, I hear you that you're moving away from these masonry structures, but I think where Commissioner Manning was going is that he'd like to see the masonry structure on
Yeah,
there.
I think so, that's our.
I'm of the same reason, and I'll tell you why. There are numerous parks, so I live over there.
Mhm.
There are numerous parks. There's one on either side of this. I know you show residential, and the kids love nothing more than to climb fences. And they're gonna climb over that 6-foot fence, and they're gonna get in there. I would just as soon have a masonry structure around this equipment, so we don't have any mishaps with the kids.
Okay.
Would you be comfortable with what we did like at 66, an exposed aggregate panel? So it's an enclosed structure, but rather than something that replicates a brick, it's an exposed aggregate surface? That's what we did over on.
Does it provide
66.
protection from the kids getting inside there and messing around with the equipment?
Yeah, it would be a solid structure.
Yeah,
It would be,
yes.
But it wouldn't be a brick structure, it'd be an exposed aggregate. They're panels that are prefabricated.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
It's okay.
if that's okay with staff. And again, I don't mean to speak for anybody else. I just want it protected around the
I agree.
equipment.
And that,
kids
is that,
getting in there.
those aggregate structures that you're talking, is that something similar to like what they use for sound deadening on the toll roads where it has the brick or stone appearance?
On the toll road?
You know, the walls along the.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
It's kind of like a concrete slab where there's like pea gravel in it.
Embedded.
Ah,
yeah.
okay. All right, now
Like,
I'm understanding.
like the paver stones you see
Yeah,
at Home Depot.
now I'm
or
understanding,
something.
thank you.
Okay.
The
I
other-
mean, if we did something like that, we might not even need a fence. I think the thing to the north, the site to the north has the masonry structure or the shelter, whatever it is, and it doesn't even have a fence. It's just got the landscaping around it. So you may just avoid the fence that nobody wants to look at, right? I mean, we just put
Personally, I
a,
wouldn't have any issues with that.
Yeah.
If we went the structure of the aggregate or masonry,
yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with
just something to
that.
protect the equipment
Sure.
from the kids, really not protect the equipment, protect the kids.
Mhm.
Correct.
So,
Yes, good point, sir. Yes, sir.
so I would assume that that's something that between now and the public hearing, staff and petitioner, you guys will
Yeah.
chat about it there. My thought on that, I'm in agreement about if it were an enclosed structure, the fence is a bit duplicative there because it's kind of serving the same purpose. Landscaping would, could be different
Mhm.
as opposed to the arbs. It could be more low profile. I don't know a lot about that, but I would assume that with an enclosed structure, then it brings in the temperature control concerns that you mentioned there, so.
Yeah, I
But
mean.
they have them, so I'm sure they've got
Yeah.
engineering figured out.
Some equipment engineer somewhere, I'm sure there's something that can exist to handle it, but I'll have to bring it to their attention.
Yeah. All right,
Sure.
great. Commissioner Augustiniak.
This gate that staff and, can somebody, I'm trying to picture what they're asking for.
You know, when we do any plan review, we circulate it to all the departments.
Sure.
And so that came back from the Public Works Department, and I think they were just concerned, trying to have some, deterrent from people that are riding up and down the bike path to be attracted to go down this path. I think a sign that says, private drive or strictly prohibited or something
Well,
might serve the same.
'cause-
Because you can't really you just put a gate across it, you could ride your bike around it.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand. If you
Yeah.
put a gate there, you just walk around the gate.
I know.
It doesn't seem to make.
Again, I'm in agreement with all you guys. I used to live over in that area, and at 167th, where it crosses, you'll notice that it has those little gates, and I think that's actually to prevent vehicles from driving in there. So bicycles and pedestrians can still get
Well, they're
up
gonna
and-
need the vehicle to go in there, so it's gonna be
Right,
difficult for them.
but they would have a key, and I'm in agreement. I mean, if you're in a
Seems
vehicle
kinda
and you're
redundant.
already on the path, you're gonna go around it, so.
You might look for some signage.
It's a
that's
silly,
not
it's a
intrusive.
silly requirement, I mean, but.
Redundant.
Yeah, and it's not that far down, I mean, you could see where you're going.
Yes.
And if you're riding on that path, you're not going to, I mean, what is it, about 25 feet off? You're not going to go down by accident.
No,
is it?
it's not very interesting, so.
As long as they don't think
you
it's a
know.
restroom.
Yeah.
So I think the consensus among the commissioners here is that we certainly wouldn't make that a requirement
Okay.
from the Plan Commission. So, let's see. The only other question I had, and I think you may have addressed it, just in these types of things, with the additional 161 feet, I'm sorry, additional 61 feet, that's, it sounds like that's the minimum, and so there would not be any room to co-locate a second carrier or anything like
No.
that, right?
No, and that's, again, that's more of a Commonwealth Edison requirement.
Right.
You know, and these are not designed to have more than one carrier per spot, per tower, transmission tower, which is why this is the fourth carrier that's tried to get on a transmission tower within the same parcel of property again. So this is. These are the place to go, apparently, in Tinley Park, because this is what makes the most sense.
I think if we can get past the number one open item, which is the
Yeah.
priority hierarchy, I think that we're in pretty good shape. If we could just summarize what the points are here and make sure staff has enough takeaway. So we're looking at potentially not having a variation on the structure and actually going with the code, but then not requiring a fence. So we're looking at the alternatives, possibilities there. What other open items were there? I think that was probably the main.
Just the RF study, as you mentioned, and landscape.
Okay. And landscaping, we've kind of given some thoughts on that, so.
Paula, will the property owners around this be notified
Oh, sure.
of the public hearing? Okay.
There's quite a few, wasn't there? That was a
Yeah,
pretty
there
big
was,
mailing.
I think 140.
Okay.
What do we do about the public hearing?
Sounds like that's everything that the commissioners have.
Where are you gonna put it? Put it right, huh? You put it.
Do you have everything you need there, Paula?
Pardon? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
That's all right. Do you have everything you need from us?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sure.
That's good. All right. Thank you for your time.
Yes, I'll see you
Look
in a
forward to
couple of weeks. Thank you.
having you for
Thank
that
you.
one. Have we already noticed that? Is that, okay. And what's the date on that one?
Next meeting?
It's the next meeting, 17th?
Yes, 17th.
Excellent. All right, then. That concludes.
I'm glad you said something about the fence. I just don't like wood fences.
No.
I said something, but you know, it's not right.
That concludes our regularly scheduled program here. We can move on to good of the order.
Ta-da! Another lifesaver. Dan, born and raised in Tinley Park. I worked with him before. Wonderful, actually. I forgot how wonderful he was. Like he said something to me today. He goes, "I feel like I've been here for weeks." And it does. I mean, you know, where you work, like I say this all the time, if you can't have a good time where you work, we're here more with these people than we are with our spouses. It's such a great team we've got going, and I'm just really happy. And my shoulders are getting taller and taller, and I'm leaving early, and it's really wonderful. So.
Good. Welcome. Look forward to hearing more.
He's very busy already, very busy.
So you're originally from here. Are you moving back into town?
Eventually,
Eventually.
I'm getting married this year, so.
Well, congratulations on that as well.
We'll probably next year when our lease is up, we're looking to move back to the area. It's not on my decision if I move back to Tinley, but we'll see.
His mom lives here,
Yeah.
and his fiance works to the south, so.
I'm excited to lower my kids. I come from off in the States and.
Yikes. Wow, that is.
Wait,
Divine
and
intervention.
your fiance works further south than here?
University Park, yeah.
So she's even got a,
Yeah, we
wow.
lived in Iowa, now that was our in-between point, and now we gotta move back down this way, and sure, commute.
Great.
I'm excited to be back in Finland.
And Dan, what is your last name? I didn't catch your... Ritter. Oh, okay, yes. Well, welcome back.
But it just kind of shows you, I mean, nothing against the normal process for recruiting employees, but we didn't do very well trying to do that. And as I mentioned, over Christmas, I just got frustrated, and I'm calling people I know that I've been impressed with in my life. And Dan, how long ago was that?
6 years.
6 years ago. And he's changed a lot since then. He says I haven't changed at all. During his interview, he said that.
That's a good thing.
I know. So, anyway, very, very glad to have him here. The other really good news is I'm taking to board next week our choice on software. I know you're probably tired of hearing about it, but that's a really big project for me, and it's really going to make a difference in the building department. It's going to improve efficiencies. I'm a little frightened about implementation because it's going to really suck away some staff time to get it done, but we'll do whatever it takes. So we're taking that to the CD committee, I'm sorry, not board, CD committee next week, and then on to the board after that. I forget when we're taking that. We're taking it to CD on May 8th, and May 15th, we're taking it to the village board. We're getting a lot of fence variances again. We thought that we had cured that, remember?
Mm-hmm.
They're not coming to you, they're coming to ZBA, so he's cutting his teeth on this, and he's had to deal with it in his other communities as well. He's doing his best to inform these residents that these are the new rules. But, kind of the awkwardness you heard that was happening at ZBA, where the law wasn't necessarily, the code was not necessarily being enforced, and so it's hard to start enforcing a code when somebody is right next door to somebody who got something that they shouldn't have. So expect to see some angst on Facebook, because I'm sure that's going to happen, but we're doing our best to uphold the code that you felt strongly about creating. We're also going to be working, this is another project for Dan, RV parking, something I've had on my list for a while to get done. It's a problem with a lot of complaints that we get, and so I've done some basic research on it, and I had somebody else work on it for a while, but Dan's going to take it over and get it done. Regarding small or cell towers, when we did the cell tower text amendments a while ago, it actually, when we brought it before you, we actually addressed small cells at the same time because it's the new technology. I don't know if I ever told you that we separated those two things out, and we never took it to board because we knew some legislation was coming down, and there was legislation on the governor's desk for months. He finally just passed that, and it's disastrous for villages. So I don't know if I want to put you on the spot. Dan's done a little research on that. He's read 2 of the briefs. Do you want to give a little synopsis of what it means for us? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Okay. I don't even know if the synopsis says no at all, but it basically limits you can't have a zoning review. It limits the amount of time that we have to review something. That we can do some design guideline type thing and regulate some aesthetics of it, but it's a permitted use by right in any commercial zoning district, industrial zoning district, or public right of way. So
Scary for downtown.
Yeah, there is still
It is.
some limits to it, and you can have some design regulations as to where the equipment goes and how you screen it. But if it's co-locating in a right of way, it has to be permitted in some way.
Is that because of state legislation? It's not federal, because I know a long time ago the small dish there was federal regulations that kind of by right people could put them up, and a lot of condo associations were inappropriately prohibiting them. There were a lot of cases on that. So it sounds like maybe it's
I think
a
this
similar
was a
thing.
push from the
lobbyists.
companies.
Good lobby.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since there was a lot of restrictions or
A lot of dollars that you
getting
chance.
Money well spent.
And this even limits permit fees and hearing fees that we can charge, so it's pretty restrictive in terms of what we can do, but I think we can still look at some design requirements.
Yeah, design requirements.
But it sounds from your initial analysis that we may have to have like an expedited process for it to make sure we.
Correct, it's basically.
Won't even come through you.
It
Right.
basically has to, would be a staff review unless they want to not follow the design requirements, then I think they
Right.
could push it.
So as long as they meet minimum standards, you really can't stand in the way of it.
Correct. And then you have to give them some ability to go on almost any existing utilities.
Very, very strong lobby. I can remember years ago when I was working in Frankfurt, I was able to, we had a lot of new developments going on, and I did some research on milligauss readings, and there were some studies about the dangers of that. So created an ordinance and required a certain distance from any, at a certain level of milligauss. I think it was 300 milligauss. So when you look through Frankfurt, you'll see where the high tension wires go, and there's pretty far setbacks where those homes are. Then, is it 1996? I'm trying to think when the Telecommunication Act came in.
Thanks.
Couldn't do anything. You couldn't legislate against it. You couldn't do anything that would reflect that there could be health safety issues related to it. So it's not good. All right. So, but we'll take care of that, and we'll get something written up for everybody to understand. The plat that you all approved for Oak Park Avenue got approved at Village Board. So we're orchestrating a sort of a signing of the plat by all the parties coming up next week, I believe it is. We also, if you've been watching any of the board meetings, we have what's called Oak Park Avenue Playbook. This is an initiative by the mayor to try to provide some incentives and assistance to commercial development in the downtown. So we have 5 separate grants that only went to first reading Tuesday, and so we'll have an adoption at the next meeting, or hopefully an adoption at the next meeting. So one of the biggest projects now that I'm free from doing a lot of the other stuff is, and a very important one that I wish I could have gotten to before, is a lot of legacy code amendments. Just like any code, not trying to criticize the legacy code, when we write the sign code, when you write any code or you amend the ordinance, until you try it, until you try to think through any possible scenarios, but you're never going to get it perfectly. And so the legacy code was written in 2011. I think it's based on a very good plan. The 2009 legacy plan, I think, is sound in its thesis and what it was attempting to do. I have some concerns about the code that resulted from that. And probably the most difficult thing is its interpretation of heritage sites and the restrictions of existing commercial structure, existing commercial uses no longer being able to function as a commercial use once they spend more than 50% of the value of the property in improving it. So it's almost a disincentive to do anything to improve the property. And we always have this issue of Cook County property taxes where they're going to want to make a mixed use. So if someone wants to come along and try to get a break on taxes and put a residential unit on the second floor, well, they lose their commercial ability to use the property commercially. So I think it exposes us actually to some taking issues as well. So that's going to be my biggest priority here over the next couple months. I hope that'll all come through you as a text amendment. I'm not going to promise a date because I bet I don't make it. So
on the legacy code?
On the legacy code.
Right. I'm glad you bring that up because everything that you just said there, I'm in complete agreement with.
Yay.
One other aspect of it that I think, and this may fall in the umbrella of what you're just talking about there, because that sounds like a lot of detail that needs to be worked out. One aspect of the legacy code that I think we could potentially address earlier is strictly and I know you covered this in the Citizens Advisory Committee, just which properties are in which zone.
That's part of this. I don't want to call it redistricting because it implies other things. That's probably one of the biggest part of it.
Yes.
But I don't want to just shoot from the hip. It needs to be studied. It, you know, probably right along with that is the whole alley issue
Mhm.
and the designation of alleys. So I need to go property by property and understand what the potential for development and redevelopment on those properties, uses of alleys. You know, the concepts are there. I think whatever I end up recommending is got to be based on the legacy plan, which again, I think is a sound master plan for the downtown. So, wish me luck.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think maybe as an interim step, I think there's some opportunities to look at what we won't call redistricting. I think there's maybe some quick wins there, which, as we go into greater detail, can be polished up.
It's part and parcel. They're going to go hand in hand.
Okay, good.
That's it. We're going to stay busy.
All right. Any other comments or questions from the commissioners?
No.
Receive any comments from the public? Okay, hearing none. I entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
So moved.
So seconded.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.